Hello and welcome a new video. What are subtle red flags at a job interview that say working here would suck? I always ask about training and learning curves. Every job I've had that went wrong, I noticed that when that question came up they stumbled. The current job I have, when I asked the question they had sparks in their eyes as they explained the whole process from day one of shadowing to the transition to working solo. And even when COVID hit they managed to continue without skipping a beat. Was interviewed by a senior programmer and the department head. The department head was continuously making condescending remarks towards the other interviewer. Poor guy just sounded broken. Hope he's somewhere else now. I had an interview once. The owner of the company told me he was going to hire me, let the man in the office train me, then fire that man once I was up to speed. He also told me that sometimes employees have to hold their paycheck. And the final capper, not that I needed it, I had already decided not to work for him, was he told me I looked like his nephew. I am female. Once an interviewer straight up asked me if I had any trouble working for free on weekends. I told them my free time is more valuable than anything and that the only way that I would work a weekend is if they are paying me and if I felt like working a weekend. She got really mad at me and ended the interview right away. Biggest red flag I've ever seen because they didn't even try to hide it. I had a job interview with two people asking questions. One of them brought questions for the wrong position. Things I found out later. The person on the IT team who had been with the company longest had been there just under a year. Their turnover was higher than McDonald's, over 50% turnover annually. They had a goal to get it down to 40%. Bonuses only get paid 1 year after you've been there. For a full calendar year, that only starts counting on January 1st. If you get hired January 2nd, 2020, you wouldn't get your first bonus until 2022. There was no manager for the programmers. There was no director for the IT team. They had tracking software for your every keystroke, idle time, programs you were active in. They would question idle time, which meant people on the phone with clients would be questioned often because their computers would be idle. There was a lot going wrong, but the interview slip-up wasn't enough to really give it away in time. Suffice it to say they didn't meet their turnover reduction goal. I was once part of a group onboarding for an IT job. They handed us all the one-page new hire contract and everyone except me signed immediately. When I read the paperwork, I discovered we were signing a mystery document. Clauses included I agree to abide by the personal search and seizure security policy attached. Without other pages, there was no way to determine what I was agreeing to. I kept requesting more and more pages until the HR drone said okay, I guess, me, is just determined to hold everyone up. We will handle you separately if you're struggling so much. After I walked out and drove home, I called the hiring manager to apologize for not taking the job. He informed me that HR reported I had walked out after refusing to be drug tested. Last job I worked. Yeah, everyone here is new, but it's totally because of COVID. The boss doesn't like people going out to get lunch because they're afraid you'll never come back, so being your own lunch. You'll get weird looks if you leave on time. It was a Chinese-owned company with heavy Chinese work culture influence, so you were expected to stay overtime all week. Also, the people here are nice, but it's pretty stressful. We cater lunch and dinner for our whole team. Sounds like a positive, but what it means is, we expect you to be working past dinner time hours, and there will be a lot of social pressure to never leave, and to socialize with the team well past working hours. We don't understand that anyone might want a life outside of work. Less of a problem now, hopefully, but in the tech bro heyday, this was super common. When you are signing all the forms they give you and you are taking your time to read over every document so that you can fully understand what you are getting into, and people come in and start telling you that you don't need to read this and that, just sign here and so on. I didn't know it at the time, but you'll be wearing many hats was a sign that they were going to give me the work of 4 positions and the wage of 1. I didn't last a year there before I left, and now I won't even finish reading job ads that include that line. If you are unsure what direction you want to take your career, many hats jobs do help you figure it out. They will also leave you angry, tired, and frustrated, but you'll leave with a better sense of what you are good at and what you like doing. My current boss gave me a great tip on the last interview I had. He said ask them if you can pick an employee to chat with about how they like the position you're applying for. They'll give a better impression of the place than management. I got the job I was interviewing for. I turned it down because the above is the kind of management I want to keep in my life. Also, the place undercut my pay offer, I found out, which is certainly also a red flag. I once showed up for an interview and the manager wasn't there that day. No one called me to let me know. The assistant manager was not apologetic for the scheduling issue at all. She was literally just like, oh, she's not here today, in a tone intuition that suggested I should somehow already know that. She said they would call me to reschedule sometime the next week. I told her I was currently unavailable MW but could come in any time THF. She said if I couldn't make time for the interview, I probably wouldn't be a good fit. I said okay and went on to my other interviews and ending up working elsewhere. You'd think that would be the end of it, but both the manager and the assistant manager badmouthed me to a few other people in the industry, including one of my friends. Hello? I made time for an interview. You disrespected me by not calling me to let me know it was cancelled. I gave you the times I was available to reschedule, and that was disrespectful somehow. Jobs where the expectations of the position aren't clear. The person hiring you should be able to give a clear idea of your responsibilities are day to day in a practical way. It shows that the company understands what it wants out of the position. I've worked a couple positions that had a really hard time figuring out who was supposed to do what that lead to a lot of confusion, and both of them had this in the interviews. If the company you're working for can't define what success in that position looks like, you won't be able to either. When you ask, what do you like about working here, and the interviewer talks about the location of the job, it's a great place to live, instead of the actual job. I interviewed for an independent contractor position on a piece rate. It's hard to predict how much you're going to earn on a piece rate, so to attract me, the manager showed me some pay stubs from his guys. I noticed that he could easily cherry-pick pay stubs to show his best guys' best weeks. All that tells me is that I'm likely to make less than what he's showing me, at least on average. The pay stubs were obviously designed to be confusing. They were a full page and absolutely covered in data. He wanted me to be impressed by a dollar amount, obviously not accounting for costs which the contractor has to carry or taxes which the contractor has to deduct and pay, but he took them away before anyone could have deciphered what the pay period, piece rate, number of jobs or KMS was. He showed me other people pay stubs. What the fuck? Another red flag is that they were desperate to hire because they didn't have enough contractors to deliver the work contracts they'd already sold. I had two guys from different offices call me after I'd declined the position who apparently still thought I was considering it. At my last place of work, the person interviewing me had a printed cartoon on their wall of someone who looked like a bomb had blown up in their face, with the caption, "I spoke with boss name about it." I guess we're still doing it. That wasn't subtle at all, but I ignored it. The boss was an absolute tyrant who wouldn't listen to her staff, consider changing her mind about anything, or let people do the work they were best suited to do. She wouldn't show up for weeks at a time. The job itself was decent, but she was the worst boss I've ever had. I was once told sometimes the hourly workers go on strike and they lock us in to keep the production line running, but management brings us steaks and we have an informal agreement with the unions so you can cross the picket lines once a week to visit your wife. We don't like clock watchers here. We expect everyone to be committed, expecting more work for no extra pay, getting mad at you when you leave at 5 even though your stated work hours end at 5. If they tell you not to discuss pay, I never ever followed this rule. It's important to find a way to broach the subject with your coworkers. If they are of the mind frame that it's impolite to ask someone their pay, then tell them yours and pay very close attention. Do they smile a bit? Do they look disappointed? Try to gauge from that. Because we don't discuss pay has always been a way to hold down wages and nothing else. It's illegal, but unfortunately it occurs anyway. Do you have a strong personality? Meant everyone else who worked there were raging cunts who I literally got into massive shouting matches with and quit over within 6 months of having started. The money was good, but no tie. Had an online interview with a company a few years ago. Was interviewed by the regional manager. Seemed like a normal interview. Halfway through, he let slip that there were 6 other people from his company watching and listening in, but the software was set up so I could not see or hear them. And he actually got a kick out of telling me this. It was like being on a first date with someone and finding out later she had a hidden camera on her and her parents and 6 other family members were watching the whole time. I'm like, yeah, no, fuck that noise. It wasn't exactly an interview. It was working in a slumlord building, so he didn't really care about stuff like interviews. I was a friend of a friend's nephew and the only person interested in the job because I was just about homeless and this job came with a free apartment. So it was really my first day, everyone and everything completely sight unseen. I showed up to have to go find my co-janitor or handyman, who A, hadn't even been told he was getting a new coworker and B, was putting a replacement door on my apt because one of our crackhead tenants had ripped it off the hinges the night before. Hadn't even been there 15 minutes yet. But, like I said, I was stuck. And that job gave me some of the craziest stories you've ever heard. The one question every job applicant must ask is, why is this position open? And watch the faces of everyone in the room before they answer. If they tell you the company's growing and it's a new position, great. If Smiling Mary says it was her job but she was just promoted, terrific. If they tell you that the last couple of people they tried in the position just didn't work out, thank them and leave. You're not going to have kids anytime soon, are you? What are your childcare arrangements? Are both things my wife has been on the receiving end of. You'd assume you wouldn't apply if it was an issue, right? Funnily enough, I'm a man and I've never been asked. I interviewed for a job and the guy was just kind of off-putting. He answered a personal call the middle of the interview, which fine whatever, but never addressed or said sorry or excuse me for a second out of common courtesy and professionalism. Just sat and talked for an awkward couple of minutes. I was running errands all the next day and had 3 missed calls from the workplace. Missed another call the next day, but at that point I had decided it wasn't for me. When I tried returning his call to tell him I was no longer interested, he wasn't there. But then it became kind of entertaining because he called me nearly every day for 2 weeks after my interview. It's just a retail job, so I can only imagine how hard-pressed he was to have an employee and how that work environment must be. My secret weapon. Towards the end of the interview, you will inevitably be asked if you have questions. Say this without skipping a beat. Are you happy working here? If they are, they'll answer right away, and their genuine happiness should be evident in their demeanor while answering. If not, they'll have to think about it for a sec and will likely stumble and be caught off guard. Their answer will either not be genuine or full of excuses. No one expects this question. I've done that at every interview I've ever had, and it has been the deciding factor in some cases.